Hello and welcome to Take This TV, the television book club podcast where each week we watch an episode or two of our favorite shows. We talk about them with our friends in the fandom. Guess who that is? It's you. I'm Carmen Askernes, and I'm joined as always by the wonderful Kimberly Woods. Hello.
Hey, hot potatoes.
This season we're watching Constellation.
And today we are on episode 5. It's called 5 Miles Out, the Sound is Clearest. While on the run with Alice, Joe makes a chilling discovery. Bud threatens to exact his revenge on Henry.
Oh. Oh my gosh.
So first of all, we found out that Magnus is not dead. We were a little bit concerned about Magnus.
Magnus lives.
He's okay. But yes, Joe is on the run with their daughter. She goes to the European Space Agency, steals the Cal experiment, and there they go, off to seek out the Marine Observatory, where we meet the delightful siblings. What's the name? Lawrence and Walborg Bang?
Walborg and Lawrence Bang, yeah. the eccentric siblings.
So that's pretty exciting because we get a lot of ghost tapes.
Oh my gosh, the ghost tapes. It was interesting to see sort of what led up to the moments where we first meet the characters in the pilot episode. Because a lot of the stuff that's happening kind of leads us up to the moment where we first run into Joe and Alice in the pilot, which answers our question from the previous episode we were talking about, where we thought that it was an alternate universe or are we time traveling? So we were just kind of seeing things out of order. So now we're getting more context for some of the stuff we saw in the first episode, which was insightful, but also
yeah, it felt like we weren't bouncing around as much this episode, which was nice because we got to kind of get a little more grounded and maybe feel like we're starting to figure out a little bit of what's going on.
Yeah, starting
kind of, maybe.
Every time they answer something, there's more questions, and I love it though.
I really love the moment with the ghost tapes because the siblings are just kind of kooky and funny, and they're saying things like you can only hear the ghost tapes on the water, which is where we get the title of the episode. They have to go 5 miles out in order to listen to the sounds of these ghost tapes. And on the ghost tapes, we are hearing Irina in one of them.
Yes, I think so, because they were saying that they heard a cosmonaut who died. And so it sounds like the version of Irina that died and that Joe found on the space station is the one that they heard. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I also like the idea, too, that once again we have this liminal space that they need to go to in order to listen to it. And then in one of the episodes we were talking about quantum physics and things being in, a liminal space before they decide what they are, or before somebody says what they are when they're in that liminal space. So it's just interesting that we get that concept again.
Yeah, there's a lot of callbacks to some of the concepts we learned earlier. It kind of felt like they were needing to be sort of sensory deprived by going 5 miles out on the lake and being sort of detached from everything.
Yeah.
In order to, as Walborg said, to train your ears in order to listen and hear what's on the tapes.
Yeah. And also just the idea that space itself is a liminal space. Alice is freaking out.
Alice is losing it.
I don't know if she can tell what's being said on these tapes, but it seems like the more they play them, all we hear as an audience really is static, but the lady herself, Walborg, says you have to train your ears to hear it. But it seems the way that Alice is reacting that it's disturbing her. Maybe more than just oh my god, it's static. I don't know if I feel like she's actually understanding what's being said.
Yeah. So we don't really get to see things from Alice's perspective in this episode, but in the past we've seen when, I think maybe it was last episode, she saw her mom's wake. And so Alice is kind of experiencing similar, what do we call that? Jumps? Dimension hopping, whatever. Yeah. Experiencing something similar to Joe. And so It's a possibility that maybe she's even seeing these moments, or like you said, hearing them more clearly, and so she's really terrified about that.
And for some reason, too, we find out this episode that one of the reasons she's been hiding in the closet is because there's a Valya or something that doesn't want her to play, that wants her to hide. And Joe asks her to draw this Valya, and it's the dead cosmonaut.
Ooh.
So it's Irina that she's apparently seeing as well as hearing.
Yeah.
Which is really creepy.
When they were in the diner and she was like, can you draw this? And they were like, how do you define the fears of Valya or whatever? Can you draw it? In my head, I was like, she's going to draw Joe.
Yeah.
Did you think that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was like, she's going to draw a dead Joe. But she didn't. It wasn't dead Joe. It was dead Irina. So.
Yeah. Which we caught a glimpse of in a previous episode when Henry and Irina were dancing. And then Bud decided to do a murder, and that like caused Irina's face to get all ghastly for a moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Speaking of Bud, in one of the previous episodes, we see him stop taking his pills or throw his pills over the off the ship. And in this episode, we're seeing the consequences in Henry because of their entanglement or whatever. It seems that. Bud is now able to affect Henry a lot more clearly.
Yeah.
We get Henry waking up in the bed and saying, Henry! Which was very disconcerting at first.
Like a Pokemon.
Like, what am I watching? And then, as he's walking through the hotel room, he passes a mirror and we see Bud. Later on in the episode, we have the scene where Henry pees himself, and then later Bud is kind of taking credit for that and being like, I made you pee yourself.
Yeah.
And Bud seems very determined to somehow exact his revenge. Yeah.
So we saw during Bud's conference that he was at on the cruise ship, he mentioned the accident that happened was Henry's fault. And at the time, it was kind of like, oh, is he referring to himself in the third person? Was there another person named Henry, his common name? But it seems like he has some sort of resentment toward the Henry that we know. And it does seem like they've been aware of one another for a while.
Yeah.
So
it very much seems like Bud is upset that our Henry is getting to take credit.
He's a hero.
He's the one that's the hero. He's living the life that Bud is supposed to be living, and Bud got stuck with the sucky life where he's the one that messed up. Mm-hmm. So he's
gonna exact his revenge.
I don't know how he's gonna do it, but slowly they're becoming more and more entangled. I think Irina was also asking our Henry if he was taking his pills. Which was interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know if she could sense something too happening or hear something different in his voice, but I thought that was she picked up on it.
She did. And we also have that moment. So Joe calls her friend, whose name escapes me at the moment.
Ilya, I think. Something sounds like Ilya.
Something like that. Yeah. And she's asking him to test his pills. Because she essentially tells him everything over the phone. But what are you going to do? Well, actually, first she finds No, actually, sorry, that's something different. So so she tells her friend everything, tells him to test his pills, and then we see him trying to investigate and looking for some medical records, and he essentially gets denied access to those records, and they're like, these don't exist anymore.
And they're Joe's, right? They're Joe's medical records?
So
whose medical records are they?
I don't know. I had that went by pretty quick. I was like, was he trying to access Joe's medical records, or was he trying to look up, other people's records, or... Because he would be able to access his own. It'd be weird.
It seemed like it, because he tested his own pills and they were normal. They're actual vitamins. The A category, which he got, is actual vitamins. Whereas the B category that Joe gets, we learned, was lithium. Mm-hmm. So he does confirm that for us, that A is actually safe. But yeah, I think he's looking for Joe's, and for some reason I guess, because they're sketchy, and are making her take lithium, they pulled it, so...
Yes, and then he gets confronted by Irina, who asks why he's looking for those medical records and tells him that if Joe wants help, then she should reach out to her directly. So we do get the impression that she knows more about what's going on than she's letting on. Mm-hmm. And at first I thought Henry did as well, but now it's like maybe there are some things he doesn't know, although he and Bud are aware of each other. So yeah. I don't know. There's still lots of questions that we don't have the answers to.
Yeah. So it's very interesting. The exciting part for me, too, at the end of the episode, is that we kind of learn that once they start putting the tape recorder near the little cowl experiment, you start to hear what's on the tapes more clearly. So we get to hear a little bit more of Irina's time, which is from the first episode too, with the fire that happened. And then we also get to hear later on, when they're back at the cabin, that basically it sounds like Joe is the one that died instead of Paul, because we hear Paul's voice calling out for Joe, like an accident just happened. And right before that, we get the nice little normal conversation of mother and daughter talking, which Alice overhears, but she says, "Mommy, that's not me. I don't speak Swedish. And I don't call you Mama."
Oh, man.
So,
yes. Yeah. This kind of like, in the previous episode, we saw Alice tell Joe that she doesn't think that she's her mom. And so now, over the course of this episode, we kind of see Alice putting the pieces together of like, something is off, and mom's not acting how I remember her. Mm-hmm. And so, Alice is a smart kid and she's putting the pieces together. There was that moment when they were at the siblings' house and she steals the phone. And I was like, is Alice just being a little klepto? But she stole it to call Magnus. And I was like, oh, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But just like the idea of knowing somebody's phone number was really foreign to me, I guess. And so I was like, why is she stealing the phone?
She guesses the passcode, which was pretty good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was wondering too, because we see her like several times before in other episodes when Joe's like, "You haven't been practicing your Swedish." And she was giving her these looks like, and now we got an answer to those looks, which was she had never learned it, and it was another reason why she was like, "You're not my mom." Like,
yeah, how do you not know that?
You should know that I don't know how to speak Swedish. So, anyway, I thought it was an exciting episode. Anything else you want to highlight, Carmen, from this one?
Oh my gosh. It was so exciting. I love that Joe finds like one of the last payphones in existence. They're at the diner and she uses it to call the siblings. She also does a quick Google search of the siblings and sees that they were arrested because people said they were trying to scam astronauts. And then Joe fully commits to her mission, and she takes her daughter to these strangers' house anyway, even though she looks up that they've kind of been defamed online or whatever.
Which we also found out, too, that Henry had been there in the 80s to this sibling house to, like, listen to the ghost tapes.
That's right.
And cause some trouble or something. We didn't get much more beyond that.
His visit. Yeah, his visit probably wasn't as pleasant. We also get a scene with Magnus and Frederick. And so Magnus is sort of ready to get the cops involved because he's like, oh my gosh, Alice is gone. She's in danger. But, Frederick, being the corporate company man that he is like, no, you don't want to call the police. Come on. You don't want to ruin your wife's career. Which on one hand, like, I'm rooting for Joe to not, like, go to jail and get murdered by the government. So I'm like, yay. But also it's like, oh, man, Frederick is trying to, definitely cover things up. And we do have that moment where Joe asks him, honestly, to be honest with her, if he knew about the pills. And we see him, I couldn't tell if he was lying or not. What did you think?
Yeah, that was weird.
Yeah. It seemed like
he kind of knew. He wasn't, like, that surprised.
Yeah, he
I don't
wasn't
know, or
surprised.
something. He didn't act like I thought he would if he was surprised, so it seemed like he knew something.
That's a good point. He was definitely, like, ready for that question. Maybe in his training, they were like, this is what you say. And Henry goes to Frederick once he finds out the machine is missing, and I guess Frederick is going to try to find Joe and get it back. Henry's like, I have to come with you, and that's when we see Bud sort of take over Henry's body, or cause Henry to pee himself. And so I definitely misunderstood Frederick's role at the company. Mm-hmm. And it seems like he's someone in more of a position of power than I thought he was.
Yeah.
I thought he was just kind of like a guy that worked there, but it seems like he's like a director or something.
Yeah. And I still don't know what, like, in this world, what him and Joe were going to go start, because it sounded like, they had talked about starting heading up a different section of their own. So maybe it has something to do with that. I don't know. It's interesting. Just one more thing too. The sibling couple, they also talked about hearing Paul on the tapes.
Oh,
and were kind of suspicious that this Joe was here. Which I guess, again, confirms that this Joe is probably in the wrong timeline.
Mm-hmm. We get a lot of clues about that. Mm-hmm. Which makes me wonder, like, Alice seeing Joe's wake, like, is because our Joe is in this timeline, is she, like, causing things in this timeline to, like, be obfuscated or to change? Because, like, why would the siblings know that Paul is back if they aren't able to see into, like, other timelines or whatever? I don't know. It's interesting. Lots of questions. Yeah.
But the entanglement thing, I don't know, reminds me of when she was, like, learn to play the piano all of a sudden.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like, maybe that was part of that. And Carmen, you asked a question, too, about, like, what does this mean that Irina, like, her counterpart, or this Irina, is now dying because we saw the dead cosmonaut, or Joe saw the dead cosmonaut. But what's going to happen to our Joe? Like, is she okay until somebody sees dead Joe floating in space?
It's a good question. We did learn this episode, they talked about the concept of entanglement and how whatever happens to one state, or one state of matter happens to the other, something like that.
No matter how far apart?
Yes, no matter how far apart. So it's like, if Joe in the other universe is dead, then is our Joe going to die? I don't know. And
will not kick in unless somebody actually sees her and labels her as dead.
Yeah.
Because of the whole,
If Alice sees
Schrodinger's cat.
Schrodinger's Joe,
yeah. So, we'll see. I'm excited to see where this goes and what happens next.
I'm so excited. Yeah, I can't wait.
Thanks for joining us. Subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us at Take This TV on TikTok and Instagram. Thanks for watching. Welcome to the club. And remember, it's dangerous to watch TV alone.